Well, I hope everybody enjoyed their dinner tonight. And we're going to get started with the evening. But before I do, I have one thing that was pointed out to me that I missed. I introduced all these people a while ago, and that was great. But what I failed to do was failed to introduce the wind beneath their wings. So the wives and significant others of those that had stood up before, we want to thank you for making those that stood up do what they do and not letting them get out of line. And Kai, you know why I'm the mayor of our city now, right? Kiss the babies, they'll vote for you. Their mothers will vote for you. And I've kissed some ugly babies, but I told their mothers, that baby is the cutest thing I have ever held in my arms. And the mother voted for me, made her husband vote for me, and all her aunts and uncles. And I've been mayor since 2002, so. And lady, you got some cute grandchildren. Well, that's my wife, I just said that too. See, I've always said I'm dumb but not stupid. There is a difference. It's a great night, and we're going to get started. But I do want to tell you this, just a reminder. The Corvette Hall of Fame was created by the National Corvette Museum Board of Directors in 1998. And the purpose of the award is to confer the highest honor and recognition upon the most influential individuals in the history of Corvette. The award recognizes those who have made significant contributions to their respective fields, each having reached the highest level of accomplishment. Inductees must also possess the highest standard of integrity and character to positively reflect and enhance the prestige of the Corvette and the National Corvette Museum. A list of our past Hall of Fame inductees are shown in your program. And at this time, all the previous Hall of Fame inductees that are here tonight, if you would, please stand and let us give you a round of applause. Thank y'all so very much. And if you'd like your wives or significant other to stand up, I'd like to recognize, no, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I'm taking it a little bit far, right? But I'm out of trouble, okay. Okay, I'll quit entertaining now. And we're gonna get serious, because this is a very serious evening. Our inductees this year are Doug Fehan, Henry Haga, Mike McCagh, and Wendell Strode. Our first inductee this year is Doug Fehan. Janine, tell Wes to stop. I want you to please watch the screens for the video of Doug Fehan and his contribution to Corvette.
Harley Earl was probably the most influential man in American automobile design.
A lot of people share the spotlight, but don't kid yourself. Bill Mitchell was the driving force.
Everybody will light up when you say Zorar is done talking.
Checkered flag will wave. The 39th edition of the Rolex 24 at Daytona is all Corvette.
And really the fun's just begun. We're very excited. The team has worked very, very hard for this. This is the culmination of a 3-year program.
This is a great team and very representative of everything that the brand Chevrolet and Corvette stands for.
We are one of the winningest teams in the history of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. You take a great street car, you build a great race car.
Corvette Racing, we take no prisoners, we never give up.
If there was ever someone who was born to do a job, it would be hard to find a better example than our first inductee into the 2020 Corvette Hall of Fame, Mr. Doug Fehan. His earliest memories go back to War Memorial Stadium in Buffalo, New York, when his dad and his uncles would take him to see the jalopy races. He was just 4 years old, but recalls it all vividly.
I remember it as if it was yesterday, sitting in the stands. And it had a huge impact on me, to the point where I had my favorite car, Burgundy number 11, driven by Larry Marks. I've never forgotten that.
Later, they would relocate to Michigan, where his grandfather owned a dealership just north of Detroit. His dad would open a body shop there too. And right there in Motor City, Doug and his brother became immersed in the world of racing.
We started going out to Waterford Hills, which was a small 1.5 mile track in a suburb north of Detroit. And as a kid growing up, it had a huge, huge impact to be part of something like that, something so exciting, so visceral. And it left its mark. And then we moved forward, and I, along with a fellow that worked with my dad, decided we were going to build a USAC Grand National stock car in the late 60s. So 1967, 68, and 69, we campaigned that car for 3 years on the USAC Grand National circuit. I have a younger brother who grew up watching all this, and he didn't like stock car racing. He wasn't big into the roundy round thing. He liked road racing, which he had become associated with our visits to Waterford Hills. So he and I went together, and we bought a Cosworth Vega and took it out to Waterford. He drove. I pretty much wrenched on the car along with him and a couple of buddies. He was good. He set track records, won races, won championships out there. None of that went unnoticed because this club was the place where all the executives would also race on weekends. And so they were watching what we were doing. And the starter happened to be a guy by the name of Mickey Mattis. He was the official starter at Waterford Hills. He was also the motorsports marketing guy at Ford. And he said, listen, he said, we've got a program coming up, a new car, an SVO Mustang. Would you guys be interested in doing a low-key program, racing national races in SCCA, utilizing this SVO Mustang? And of course I said, yeah, darn right we'd be interested in it.
It was there that Doug began to see the relationship between customers, suppliers, manufacturers, and racers. He also discovered his gift for networking and the ability to bring people and resources together for a common goal.
We had the program set up, we were working on the schedule, and I had this, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is a official Ford factory program, albeit amateur racing. I said, I thought this had some level of salability to it. And my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my wife, had a contact at Mac Tools. And so she set up an appointment, and I went down and met with the president of Mac Tools, John Campbell. Well, they had never really been in motorsports, but I had put together a marketing program for them to integrate what we were going to do with this SVO Mustang. They liked it. The deal came down. We did it. And in 2 years, we doubled the size of Mac Tools in gross sales. At that point in time, John Campbell said, would you have any interest in becoming the director of racing for Mac Tools? Racing is a bad drug. It's just a bad drug, and it's really hard to say no. And I didn't. I said yes, and I became the director of racing for Mac Tools.
Leadership changes at Mac Tools would end Doug's association there, but fortunately for Corvette racing history, he would cross paths with Herb Fischel, executive director of GM Racing.
Herb came to me and told me that we were going to be seeing a new C5 generation Corvette. Asked if I would put together a program that we think we could sell to upper management where we would race the Corvette on a global basis. Our ultimate goal, go to Le Mans.
Talked to Herb Fischel, who had the dream, God bless him, for us to race at Le Mans, for GM to race at Le Mans with Corvette. So that's when I became familiar with Fehan, the doctor, and Gary Pratt and Miller. Fehan, Gary and I don't think that there could have been a better combination of guys working together, the camaraderie, but the focus on the car and the success. Gary does the technical, Fehan handled the drivers and the technical, I did the sponsors and the marketing, and so that's how we broke it down, but we all worked together.
Sports car racing in particular is all about teamwork, but there's always the unexpected things happening. Calmness under catastrophe was an attribute that Doug had. He had a never say die attitude about him, and I think over the years, Doug Fehan brought that type of character and strength to the Corvette team.
Every wrench we turned, every test we did, every remark we made was making Corvette history.
We'll let those who lived this adventure with him take it from here.
In the motorsports world, Doug Fehan is and always will be Mr. Corvette. After joining GM Racing in 1988, Doug was given the reins of the Corvette team by Herb Fischel in '96. And ever since then, Doug's name has been synonymous with Corvette racing.
Doug Fehan, all the fellas in that team, they have worked so hard for over a year now getting this thing just work.
We actually got our first win that year at Texas, and that was a huge turning point for the entire team. I mean, we had worked so hard to beat the Vipers.
Viper has won 12 straight American Le Mans Series races. 13 is their unlucky number.
That was when the winning started, and it hasn't stopped since. I mean, the next year we ended up winning Daytona overall.
This is the acme for the factory Corvette effort. In their third season, they have done what seemed so far away just so recently. They will come across the line, and the checkered flag will wave. The 39th edition of the Rolex 24 at Daytona is all Corvette.
Jim Miller has brought the business knowledge to the program. Gary Pratt has brought the practical knowledge, and Doug Fehan, he's the doctor. He always does a great job at presenting Corvette racing.
I always hate going up and talking in front of somebody after he talks because he always does a great job. Doug's been just a 110% effort on making, Corvette racing a success. Without Doug being there, who knows if the program would have got kicked off in the way that it did, and how many lives it's changed and how many victories wouldn't be there.
I think Doug's legacy is really the face of Corvette racing for over 20 years. That when you think of the passion and enthusiasm behind Corvette racing and the drivers, the crews and everything, Doug is kind of that centerpiece that we all go to see what's going on, what's exciting, and get motivated. Dave Hill used to have a saying way back, we had bring the racing spirit to work. And that's really was Doug's racing spirit. And we tried to bring that into the production car world and the engineering world.
He has so many talents, has contributed in so many ways to the Corvette community. In my time, 27 years on Corvette, it feels like Doug's been there from the beginning. And he really was at the inception of the race program. He really was one of the key people who started it, convinced General Motors to do it and built it from scratch to what it is today. Arguably the most successful race program ever. And a lot of people would think about that in terms of how many wins. You can measure it that way. You can measure endurance, how long has it been running, and the consistency that Corvette racing has had over the years and years. And both of those are great. But I think it goes far beyond that. Doug has been one of the people who's knit together the entire Corvette community. It starts with racing, but right from the beginning, he was a huge advocate for getting the race program and the production car team arm in arm, finishing each other's sentences, enjoying each other's work, and collaborating on both cars, both the car on the track and the car on the street. Manufacturers for years had said their street cars were racing inspired. We turned it into racing derived, basically completely integrating the teams. One of Doug's legacies is it's going to continue into the future. There'll be products out in the future that are impacted by his tenure in Corvette racing.
Beyond being smart, Doug is also fantastic at building and maintaining great relationships. That means with drivers, with team owners, with sanctioning bodies, and especially with our customers.
One of the things that impresses me so much about Doug is not only his success as the program manager of the racing program, but he's one of the best ambassadors that Corvette could have. All you have to do is attend a Corvette corral at one of the racetracks, and it is so obvious the strong link he has to the Corvette world.
Doug did things the right way and made sure his teams did so as well. He knows what racing is about, especially endurance racing, where you always learn, win or lose. We broke the car, but we learn from breaking the car, and we won't break the car the same way next time.
And he's like the Corvette general of us, and I found that out like in 2001, I believe, when we were winning the race by multiple laps towards the end. Of course, you know, cars are all dirty from racing and everything. And it's like, well, we're so far ahead. Let's bring them in the garage and let's polish them up so they look really good for the photo op after the race. And to do this, we decided, well, we're not going to have everybody watch us do this. So we closed the garage doors, and Doug comes in and with Benoit, who was our French connection, and they go, "What are you doing? You closed the garage doors." Well, yeah, that's so everybody couldn't see what we were doing. No, you closed the garage doors. That means you're out of the race, you quit, you give up, and you surrender, and you've never been here. So in Doug's multiple talents of being able to swab anybody over anything, he runs up with Benoit to the FIA, and I don't know what he said, but they all come back down and say, okay, we're giving you, this is your one free pass, and you can thank Doug for that. And if that had not happened, we would have lost the race our first race at Le Mans. And you know, and this is just typical Doug behind the scenes.
Corvette's success in motor racing, at Le Mans in particular, is largely thanks to Doug's personality. He gets involved, rallies around, he's considerate, precise, methodical, gritty, relentless, brilliant, and enthusiastic. Doug brings his American outlook to Le Mans. He nurtures the American fighting spirit. He is an ardent defender of GT cars and GT racing, and he always sees an obstacle as an opportunity to learn.
Doug being on that team, seeing Doug under the tent, seemed to just give us an edge. You knew that with Fehan there, it was just, we could do anything. And as drivers, you just knew you had to do your best because nothing else was acceptable. And if you did your best, your dad, Doug, would have your back. And it was just such a special place to be when you've got Fehan there under the team and running it. It was just, it puts a different light on it. And I've never experienced that kind of camaraderie, that kind of special relationship, and that kind of wonderful environment. Because factory teams can be pretty tough sometimes. But with Doug there, it was just such a wonderful place to be. But some of the absolute best memories of my racing career.
Doug put the effort in to make all of this stuff happen, to get that first car, to get to Texas, to get to California, all those obstacles that were given to him, and he made it happen. And, you know, 20-some years of Corvette racing would not have ever happened without Doug Fehan. And you know, you could replace me and you can replace anybody else, you know, but Doug, at the beginning, made it all happen.
You know, a couple of instances that I can remember in my time with Doug. First was the first time that I had ever been to Le Mans. I just couldn't believe that I was there, number one. It was always a dream of mine. But also to win that and be invited at that time to stand on the podium with Doug, the drivers, and the whole team was incredibly special. We carried that trophy back through the crowd. I'll never forget that. The other one that stands out in my mind, and I think it probably does for Doug too, was the famous Let Them Race, which was the 1-2 finish at the 24 Hours of Daytona in 2016. The two cars were so close and so evenly matched from the performance standpoint, from the driver standpoint, from the strategy standpoint, which were actually different strategies, but ended up at the end being so close. And when we all stood in the pit area for that race, and Doug said, we have got to let them race, we let them race. And boy, what a finish, an unbelievable finish.
With only 20 minutes remaining, the war is being contested between Gavin and Garcia in the two Corvettes.
And out of the banking, here we go. This is GT Le Mans at its finest. These two Corvettes side by side at the line. It is Gavin and Corvette number 4 winning at Daytona by, 3-4 feet over the team car of Antonio Garcia, 34 1,000ths of a second. As Corvette goes 1-2 here at Daytona. Look at that margin of victory.
During those 25 years, Doug's teams won 113 races, 14 team championships, and 13 manufacturers' drivers' titles. And I'm proud and pleased that Doug is being inducted into the Corvette Hall of Fame because I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. So congratulations, Doug, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts at General Motors, our fans, our engineers, our teams. It's been a great run. We couldn't thank you enough. Congratulations.
For his role in getting Corvette racing started and being its voice, its personality, its promoter, and for letting all of us be a part of the team. We proudly welcome Doug Fehan into the Corvette Hall of Fame.
And at this time, it's an honor to introduce the presenter for Doug, Mr. Andy Pilgrim, who will come up to the stage and present Doug's award. And this award says, Doug Fehan, for his outstanding accomplishments and significant contributions to the Corvette. Induction to the Corvette Hall of Fame, September 4th, it says 2020, but COVID made it 2021.
After watching that video, I got to meet this Fehan guy. Jesus. That's hard to believe the stuff he did. You know, you wonder how all this started. First of all, in the racing category, nobody does this by themselves. And I think the video and the little talk I gave kind of told the story behind that. How did all this start? I mean, it was through the eyes and in the mind of that little 3-year-old kid whose dad and uncles took him to War Memorial Stadium to watch those jalopy races. And then at 10 years old, laying in my bed, nightlight on, tattered and worn pages of Sports Car Graphic, reading about a race that took place a half a globe away in Le Mans, France, where they raced for 24 hours. And I'm thinking, how can this be possible? 24 hours? I'm used to a 20-lap feature, okay? These guys are racing for this. Can't be. Every night I would read that. In those days, it was all black and white photos and little art. I was mesmerized by that.
And then as we learned in the video, moving forward with my dad and my brother and the racing endeavors that we did on our own, transformational for me, as the video pointed out, was my work at Waterford Hills and getting chosen by Ford to run that program. And obviously, when you have to thank people, Mickey Mattis is more than deserving. We still stay in touch. We live pretty much in the same town. And clearly that hot young babe that hooked up with me to do a report on turbo cars, that's how we met. And she came into the shop and was doing her report. She was a major mover in the Detroit area motorsports and automobile sales business, advertising sales. And I invited her to come out to Waterford to watch the car race. And from there, indicated I needed sponsorship when I found out that I could sell this thing, or thought I could. She had the contact at Mac Tools, and she set it up with her agency, Hitchcock Fleming Agency, and the president of Mac Tools. I went down there, and those guys, I mean, hook, line, and sinker, they believed all the BS I laid on them. Lo and behold, though, I had laid it out with a complete marketing package of how we were going to grow the company. We were going to use racing as a tool, but we were going to grow the company. And as the video said, we doubled the size of the company in 2 years. All right? That gave me the confidence in believing my own line, okay, because at that point I had never done that before, but I did believe in it, and it came true. That did not go unnoticed. Herb Fischel, Hall of Fame inductee, saw what was going on. I knew Herb from before. He says, I need you to come to work for me, straighten out my road race programs. I said, I'd be happy to do that. And then introduced me to the legion of people at GM. Herb, Joe Negri, who was my immediate report to guy, a guy whose life I made absolutely miserable, always going and asking for more money, more time, more of this, more of that. He'd pull out his hair, but at the end of the day, we delivered each time he went out on a limb for us, all right? Gary Claudio, you saw him in the video, another Hall of Fame member. I can tell you this with no equivocation. He is the brightest, most ambitious, and most creative marketing guy I have ever encountered. When you look at Le Mans video with cowboy hats and Ron Fellows mustaches and berets, that's all Gary. Those were all his ideas. He was the guy who took that forward. In the halls of the Rensen, we were known as Batman and Robin. Gary always thought he was Batman. I never really had I couldn't tell him that wasn't the case. Poor guy still to this day thinks he was Batman. Come on. And then you look at my association with the actual Corvette engineering team. You know, we started with Dave Hill, the man who really was responsible for the reinvention of the Corvette, all right, in the car that he designed for 1995, 1996. That was a first real giant step forward for Corvette. And we had Tom Wallace, who some of you know the story, some of you don't. Tom and I conspired together to get Michelin. Where's my Michelin guys? Thank you. Lee, you know this story because you were part of it. We conspired to get Michelin a fair shot at becoming production car tire for Corvette. And the rest of that is history. Tom Wallace and I did that. Tom gets very little recognition for that. He deserves that. And then we moved on from Tom to the man who currently plays that role today, and that's Taj. And I can tell you this. Taj learned from Dave. He learned from Tom. And he chose to take up that mantle and not just use the job as a career builder or his next step up. He embraced that job because he loved it. He saw what we tried to do. He knew the roadblocks that were going to be there. He knew the mountains we had to climb. And it was with Taj, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You people will never know the hurdles he had to overcome, the battles he had to fight, the tears that were shed, the blood that was shed. Taj Schechter is responsible for that new C8 Corvette you see out there, and he did that on his ambition and his goal to see my goal completed, where we integrate production and race and create a great road car.
and you look at his team, all right, in the early days, we had John Cafaro, okay? We had Kirk, we had Tom. Tom's here tonight someplace. Tom, raise your hand so I can see you. How far back? You know what those teams were like in the early days, the mountains we had to climb, the things we had to do to make all that happen. And that is what I think served as the core strength of what we had. Everybody was invested in taking this thing forward. And we did that. And you see what we've created for today, and we've got great things going on in the future. Of course, none of this could be accomplished, all right, without somebody to actually do the work. I remember walking through that door in 1996 of a small company called Pratt & Miller. Gary Pratt, who I'd known for a long time. Jim Miller I knew for a long time. Bill I knew for a long time. And I said, guys, here's my dream. Here's my plan. And I laid it out to them. On that day, there were 8 people, a Ford Dually, a broken down fifth wheel trailer, and a rented bay in Wixom, Michigan. That was Pratt & Miller. That's how we started. And it was just last month, speaking of hard work, where Gary sold that company to Oshkosh Defense for $115 million. All right? I want you to think about that. 8 people, Ford Dually, broken down fifth wheel, rented bay, $115 million. How does that happen? Hard work, dedication to mission, and finding great people. They're the guys that did all the stuff you saw in that video. They designed the car, they built the car, they raced the car. Those are the people that made it all happen. I just happen to be a guy lucky enough to be at the front of that, all right? Of course, none of this could be done without drivers, all right? And we look at Ron and Johnny and Andy and Kelly and Yan and Oliver, Jordan, the new guys, Nicky, Alex. Those guys followed me into hell and back to accomplish what we accomplished. They became part of that fabric. This wasn't a job to them. They dedicated their life to that. And those are part of the reasons that we're so successful. The reason I'm standing up here tonight. But in reality, we had what I refer to as our best weapon, our secret weapon, a weapon that every other manufacturer wishes they had, and to this day still wishes they had. When you look at Corvette corrals packed with cars, when you look at autograph lines, you can't see the end of them. You don't think other manufacturers look at that and say, how did they get that? How did they do that? Bringing you into our family, making you part of our team was the best motivation and the best weapon we could possibly have. Without you, all right, I would not be standing up here tonight. And for that reason, I will be always indebted to you. Thank you and good night.
Doug, thank you very much. What an honor to put you in there. Our next inductee is Henry Haga. Please watch the screen for a video of Henry Haga and his contributions to Corvette.
The story of Corvette is dominated by many charismatic and highly visible figures. People like Harley Earl, Bill Mitchell, Ed Cole, and Zora Arkus Duntov made their mark in the automotive world in a big way. There were many, though, who played vital roles behind the scenes, working to make Corvette a world-class sports car. One such man was Henry Haga, our 2020 inductee into the Corvette Hall of Fame. Henry was born on January 22, 1931. As an only child growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, he entertained himself by drawing cars. This love for art and the automobile would continue throughout his life, eventually leading him to Art Center College of Design and to General Motors.
Then he was accepted to the Art Center School in Pasadena, California, which is Mecca for a an automotive designer, or a car nut, or a combination of both. The American cars were a little on the large side, a little slow, poor handling, and they weren't the exciting cars that you'd like to be associated with. So Henry, being in California all those years at the Art Center School, really honed his skills on what was going on around the world and the appreciation of doing things differently than the way we were doing them here in the United States. He became an expert on where were the hot cars coming from, what was the technology that was making them so far superior to what we were doing. He brought that environment to the Chevy 2 studio, and I think it started to show up in our products from that moment on till we all started cranking out some pretty exciting vehicles for Chevrolet.
Henry was the chief of Chevy 2 and then the Chevy 3 studios from 1963 to 1973.
That was one of Bill Mitchell's most serious responsibilities, which was the Corvette. And so to have Hank there, give Hank that responsibility, really showed the admiration and the trust that he had for Hank. And he'd say to Hank, after he gave Hank the job of chief designer of Chevy 3, where the Corvette was designed, he'd say, "Boy, kid, I'd pay a lot of money to get a job like yours." And Hank would say, "I'm ready to pay," because he knew he had probably a job that every designer in the building envied.
When I learned that I was being transferred to Henry's studio, I really didn't know that much about Henry. And at the time, it was the Chevy 2 studio. Inside the second or third week, he said, "Hey, want to drive my car tonight?" I said, well, sure. What is it? It's a Corvette. I thought, wow. And I fell in love with Henry that moment because he gave me my first Corvette experience in a contemporary car. It was fantastic. But Henry was so sharing. Whatever he had, you had. He was so easy to work with. It was a very, very creative atmosphere.
Henry Haga was an elegant man. I only knew him from a distance, but he invited, I was like just a young kid in the studio, and he invited me to his house with everybody else for a fantastic car event, and he was an absolute gentleman, they call it a real prince.
In the Corvette studio, I worked for a guy named Hank Haga. Hank Haga was the studio chief. He was the chief designer of the C3 Corvette. Just like Larry Shinoda and Hank and all the other Corvette chief designers, they were just easy to work for. Nobody's ever said as much, but I think they take the best people and put them in charge of their flagship car, which is the Corvette studio.
His job was to take the fantastic Mako Shark and Manta Ray concept Corvettes and tame them into production cars while preserving their excitement and energy.
So Hank had his own studio, and the first Camaro Hank did, and he worked on changes that were made to the '67 Corvette.
Henry Haga's first job as a studio head was to take the '67, where the car kind of got a little more cleaned up and tighter, and the finer vents on the side. That was out of Henry's studio.
When it came to the '68, it was the Manta Ray that had been developed by Bill Mitchell and Larry Shinoda. Of course, Bill Mitchell would say he was the Corvette designer, and Hank did a great job. The '68 Corvette is arguably, people have a lot of opinions, but it's probably one of the best ever done, maybe the best ever done. My favorite is the convertible, the car with the top down. It's spectacular.
Henry really did the number of capturing those previous show cars, the Mako Shark, the Manta Ray, capturing what they had and in a production car without losing the spirit of a special vehicle. Usually a special vehicle is so exciting, but to try to make it a real vehicle that you can get in and out of, it loses some of its magic. When that 68 Corvette came out, it had all the magic of those previous concept cars.
The C3 is a pretty nice car, pretty direct, pretty concise design. And Hank was a guy that was responsible for it. So that's a whole, and that car lasted a long time. Lasted longer than it should have, but with the updates and everything else, it was still a pretty nice car at the end, the 82.
Henry was an avid sports car enthusiast with a special love for Ferrari and Bugatti. Because of this, he would own those cars and take their inspiration to the design studio that worked on Corvette.
He had some great hobby cars and became one of the premier Ferrari enthusiasts in the greater Detroit area. And on how do you top a Ferrari? How about with a Type 35 Bugatti from 1927? He restored the car in his basement, which didn't look like a basement. It was just another creative environment for Henry.
He worked on the Bugatti for 24 years. It took 24 years to restore it, but he and his wife both participated. Ellie, his wife, was also a designer, and I think the two of them, with their design and art background, brought some real special qualifications to this restoration projects that they did. Ellie was a welder too. She did welding on the car. She did seats. She did the seats of the Bugatti. The leather jackets matched the seats. And Hank raced the car in a vintage event at the Detroit Grand Prix once, and I saw him there and he was wearing the jacket. But just a spectacular car from a design, engineering standpoint. All the Bugatti people that love Bugattis know about Bugattis. They know about Hank and Ellie. Corvette people do also. Ferrari people do also.
Loved Ferraris, but also was on watch on those great Corvettes.
During Henry's time at Chevrolet, he was able to explore the possibilities of what Corvette could be in the future.
We were doing a proposal for the four-rotor Corvette, and Jerry Palmer was Hank's assistant at the time. And Jerry did a proposal, and I did a proposal, and Hank looked at our proposals in quarter scale clay, and he said, guys, those are futuristic cars, futuristic type Corvette cars, but that's not what the Bullet wants. And the Bullet was Bill Mitchell. He was known as the Bullet, never to his face, but he was the Bullet. And he said, Mitchell's never going to buy those cars. And he says, I think I'm gonna do a car of my own. And Hank, chief designer of the studio, he ordered a quarter scale clay model and worked out a model, and he did his own version of this four-rotor Corvette. And man, he sold it. And it was exactly what Mitchell wanted.
I always liked the four-rotor car. If we could have productionized that, I think that would have been a magnificent accomplishment for all of us, because it's a seminal design. Everything about it is just, it has a perfection about it. I first saw it when Bill Mitchell drove it at Road America as a demonstration drive, and seeing it on the road, seeing it in that environment, it was an absolutely beautiful car. And it wasn't a Bugatti. They are special in their own right, and it wasn't a Ferrari. It would have been the next generation Corvette, and it could not have been a better concept design. The other car in that series that I got to know fairly well, that Henry was also involved with, was the mid-engine Reynolds Corvette, transverse V8 engine car that had an all-aluminum body, all-aluminum structure.
Perhaps his greatest contribution to Corvette was the way his management style cultivated creativity from those who worked under him.
So Henry's setting for his studio was one of fun, performance, design, design, design. There was no tension, absolutely zero tension in the studio. And you had the camaraderie of the whole management team, sculpting team, the engineers, the people coming over from Chevrolet Engineering. It was a great place to be.
Look back to like the 70s, and you look at the success of Corvette today, there's still this continuity, but it's not been a lot of people. It's only been a handful. You know, Jerry was mentored by Henry Haga, Randy, myself, Tom, a lot, you know, Tom to now, and then you got the new kids.
It's interesting, all the people that came up through that environment have all become leaders in GM design, and eventually ran the Corvette studio, and there's a little bit of Henry in all of us.
Hank should be in the Hall of Fame because of his involvement all those years, and especially as a chief designer of the C3 Corvette. Unfortunately, passed away early in life, and you know, it was like once he was gone, he was kind of forgotten.
He should be in there. There's that big block of Corvette history that's missing. You know, you kind of come up, you got Larry and Mitchell and but Henry Haga was the guy productionizing a lot of those cars.
Time creates legends. Time creates sometimes fictitious legends. But here's the real guy who really was in charge and did that C3 and did the four-rotor, and he was involved in a lot of other projects too. And because he was gone early, sometimes he's overlooked.
Yeah, Henry Haga was a great guy.
And Henry's always been the guy that said you gotta reach, you gotta try to break that chain and see what's possible. You'll never know what's possible unless you get that chain busted. So again, a lot of Henry and a lot of vehicles still around. Congratulations, Henry, you did it.
Henry would pass away in 1988 at the age of 57, but his influence lives on. For his love of America's sports car and the work he did to make it respected around the world, we welcome Henry Haga into the Corvette Hall of Fame.
Accepting on behalf of Henry Haga would be Mr. Tom Peters, but right now I'd like to introduce to you the presenter, Mr. Will Cooksey, who will come up and present the plaque. And as Will comes up, I'll read Henry Haga for his outstanding accomplishments and significant contributions to the Corvette. Induction into the Corvette Hall of Fame, September 4th, 2020. Because of COVID, it's 2021. Will.
First of all, I want to say I'm honored to be up here once again. This is amazing. When I was asked to receive this for Henry, I can't express in words the honor this means to me, and I'm here representing hundreds, if not thousands, of creative people that he has affected, whether it's design, engineering, sculpting, enthusiasts. I mean, think about it. We're all in this together here in terms of a Corvette family. And he's one of the key guys that was one of the fathers of this family. And I agree, it's a long time in coming. And although I didn't work directly for him, I can tell you, I was influenced by Henry Haga before I even knew the man, before I even knew about really what General Motors was about and even what Corvette was about. And that was at the Art Center College of Design, the same school that Henry went to, not knowing his history at the time. But what I tell you, what I did discover there was they had an industry magazine called Car Styling. And that was kind of like the Bible for designers. And what it was focused on styling and designers and designs from around the world. Every manufacturer, and it was the keynote designs that influenced the industry and the market. And I tell you, I don't remember the specific issue, but I remember in school one day opening one up, and here was this rocket ship, and it was the Aerovette. That forever changed my way of thinking in terms of design and influenced me for a lifetime. And so that was probably one of the most significant moments there. And then meeting him for the first time, a young buck in Design Center, probably around 1982, 83. He happened to be, he was an executive at Opel, and he was in town, where I would suspect was for some meetings. And I remember meeting him in the hallway, and he was, for the first time, he was exactly what you'd expect a designer to be. And John mentioned it, Jerry mentioned it, super professional, sharp, and just elegant. And that was the vision of what I held as far as the designer. And you know, as mentioned, he was Jerry Palmer's mentor, but I can tell you that this man in so many ways has mentored a lifetime of people. And when Jerry invited me to join the Chevy 3 team along with Randy and many other designers in the studio, it didn't take long for me to understand what the magic was in that studio. The bold creative passion that and the spirit that Henry really put in place that has carried through many years. Henry's influence continued throughout when he was in tenure there, and I would say also every studio that I led throughout my career, I was fortunate enough to have that experience. I did my utmost best to create an atmosphere that was creative, inspiring, and as Jerry said, it was actually a lot of fun. A lot of hard work, but a lot of fun. So with that, I'd just like to, if you have one slide, I'd like to pull up here real quick, if you guys have that. Because again, a car. Again, I mentioned Henry's influence all the way back from school with the mid-engine four-rotor. Well, here we are with the C8, where we finally brought the mid-engine to life. And I can tell you, we trace that right back to Henry's influence there. And so this is part of his legacy. So next slide here, you'll see the team that is currently led by Rich Shear. And it's that same spirit that he's carrying forth after I left that has not only continued to create the next generation Corvettes, but they were also invited to do the new Hummer. And management recognized that this spirit is very special with this group, and I know that when I was there, and it continues to this day, they recognized the Corvette spirit, and they wanted to expand that throughout the entire organization. And so the team that does Corvette and Camaros was asked to do the Hummer. And so you can see that Henry's influence not only has lived up to this point, but will continue, his legacy will continue to influence design, cars, and inspire enthusiasts like everyone here and all the people that own Corvettes and beyond are going to continue well into the future. So I feel really good about that. I feel honored to be part of that. So I just want to stand up here and say briefly and with all sincerity, thank you, Henry Haga. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Mike McCagh. Please watch the videos as they highlight his contributions to Corvette.
It has often been said that Corvette enthusiasts come for the cars, but stay for the people. For many, those people become friends and then family. One of the very best examples of this is our 2020 Corvette Hall of Fame inductee, Dr. Mike McCagh. Mike was the oldest of 9 children and the very first to buy his own car, a 1949 Chevy Coupe. Although Mike is known today for his passion for preserving the originality of cars, this first one wasn't quite fast enough for him, so it would get some serious modifications.
My first car that was titled my name is that 49 Chevy sitting over there. It had a 216 cubic inch 6-banger in it when I got it. Took me about a month to destroy that motor. I got a 60 Olds 394 and that made that sucker run.
Mike's car would become the one to beat. And as it turns out, the one that beat him was a 1957 Corvette.
One night there was a 57 Corvette Fuelie here in town, and it had a reputation of being an extremely fast car for the time. So we locked horns one night and he beat me. He jumped me out of the hole and I couldn't catch him. I could see his taillights. I was within a car length of him when we crossed the finish line. But I always admired that car, and the appeal of those taillights really got to me. So I went down to the Chevy dealership. And I think it was $17 for a pair of NOS 56.7 taillights, and went home and chopped the rear quarters on that 49 and installed the 57 taillights.
Mike would go to medical school and start his practice as a dermatologist. But when his workday ended, the fun would begin in his garage.
I used to look at the Pittsburgh Press every Saturday night for Corvettes. And that white one came up one day for $950. So I told Lee, I said, I'd really like to have that Corvette. And money was tight then.
But he told me if I left him get that car, he'd never get another one. I think he's on this 36th Corvette as we speak.
Then in 1974, he heard about the newly formed National Corvette Restorers Society, and he knew he had to be a part of it.
Some of the guys that belonged to the classic Chevy Corvette Club weren't happy with the way the originator of the club was running the CCC. So these 7 guys were the founding fathers of NCRS. So I joined, and I'm member number 14.
Mike's knowledge of the Corvette became legendary as he helped others with advice and direction.
You know, everybody talks about Corvette's an icon. He's an icon. I mean, he's done so much for the hobby, it's unreal. He's just helped everybody. I mean, I've known so many people that, you know, I need this part or I need something, and hey, call Mike. If he don't know, he knows somebody that does know, and that's just the way he was.
Mike has opened up this farm and his car collection to NCRS members for years. And I can remember coming out and helping Mike with at least, actually helping other people, NCRS members, restore the cars. Mike wouldn't restore the car for them, but he would teach them, you know, what to do, and you know, he educated them on the process of restoration of the cars. I can think of 3 cars, NCRS members, that did frame-off restorations in Mike's shop.
Mike would become a judge and begin writing judging manuals.
Our goal is to either preserve them the way they left the factory or restore them to the way they left the factory. And you know, we judge Corvettes from 1953 clear up till 2005 now, I believe and there's a judging manual written for each division. The 53 to 5 division's got a judging manual. The 56-7's got a judging manual. And some of those judging manuals are an inch thick. They're really detailed in how that 65 Corvette left St. Louis.
It's the holy grail of the Corvette industry. Everybody goes to the NCRS tech manuals. He's been really instrumental in them. All of them, everybody's 57s, 54s, he's done them all. Without him, the information be lost.
He would even serve as president of the NCRS, just about the time when talk about starting a Corvette museum was beginning.
My tenure as president was a rocky time. Some of the NCRS members thought the formation of a museum was a good idea, and some didn't. And eventually, though, NCRS contributed some dollars to help form the museum.
He later told me that he thought we were foolish and that we were throwing money against the wall. That isn't the exact terms he used, but for purposes of this, I think it'll do. He just didn't see it being a viable institution at all. But he did agree to the initial funding of the $2,000 to get what was then called the Library and Archives Committee 501c3 status. And of course that status allowed us then to collect more money in other ways.
I can remember when Dad got to be president of NCRS. I don't know what year that was, but
I don't either.
You know, at that point I realized, okay, he's really special and really knows his stuff inside and out. You know, people would come and ask any question, and without consulting a manual, he could give you how many millimeters, you know, the socket would be to fix the problem.
He passed along his love for the automobile to his children in a very special way.
When each of the kids turned about 15, I said, go over to the barn or the garage and pick out something you'd like to drive when you turn 16.
At the time, I thought I really wanted like a 68 Camaro, but we had this old convertible. It was at my uncle's house being stored in a garage, and I wanted a convertible, so it was a pretty easy sell.
And we took it to the garage and tore it apart and sanded it, painted it, put a small block Chevy in it. And then she drove it all through high school. Casey chose the 49 Chevy.
When we pulled that out when I was 14, it was a wreck, that car. I mean, it had dust on it, flat tires. We pulled it up into the garage over there, and I was grounded a lot in high school. So Dad and I worked a lot on that car, that 49, together in the garage. And having restored that car with him has given me more work ethic than anything else. You do it right the first time. And that's one of the things I learned from Dad. If you're not going to do it right the first time, don't do it at all. I still have that car, and I'll have that car forever, but it is definitely a symbol of childhood, and it's it was important to Dad, and it was important for him to instill those values in all of us that you need to work hard to get what you want.
And then Marcy, she chose a 47 Chevy, and we put a small block in it with a power glide. Our son Mike, I got the brilliant idea to build a 57 Chevy extended cab pickup. It's a neat looking little truck. So all four of them, they were involved in the building of these cars. And I always figured that if they had to do a little elbow grease to build these cars, maybe they'd take better care of them than I did my first car.
For Mike, it was always family first, and this included his Corvette family. He was always up for having fun with the cars and making memories.
Well, we did a lot of trips with NCRS, which was really fun. It was like our second family. We always looked forward to those trips, and it was even better when we were old enough to drive.
And we never went on vacation as kids unless it was around an NCRS convention.
When road tours were in the East, they would go out of their way to stop at Mike's place in Maryland, and Mike would host the road tours for dinner or a lunch, as was appropriate. And him and Leah would put out quite a spread for us, and we'd fill up one of their fields with Corvettes.
They had an event here that was for 3 days, and people would come and bring their families. It was a big family outing, and they would judge cars, and we would have a corn roast and crabs, and sometimes a band. It was really fun.
Mama hated diesel so bad.
A lot of memories have been made here at the farm and traveling with Mike, you know. And I think as an NCRS member, enthusiast, he's a legend.
Well, Mike absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame, mostly because he exemplifies a hobbyist, a true hobbyist. Years ago, the cars weren't worth very much. They were simply used cars. And we all thought we were hobbyists because that's all there was to it. You spent money on the car, you never thought you were going to make any money off of it. And Mike is that kind of a guy. He still is of the mindset that whatever he does with the car is to advance the knowledge and to exemplify the way the factory built it, as opposed to sell the car to somebody and make a profit off of it.
Looking back on my life as a Corvette enthusiast, I suspect that involvement with the family, the 4 kids and the wife Lee, is the top of the list. And then preserving quite a few C1 and C2s from the boneyard, and helping NCRS members preserve their cars.
It was important for him to instill those values in all of us, that you need to work hard to get what you want. Let me look around this place, but he's humble as can be.
That's the best thing he gave us.
Yeah, was to be humble and help others.
Yes, absolutely.
And work hard, and if you want something, you go get it yourself. It's not going to be handed to you. So we're very fortunate that, you know, we can call him Dad.
I love him to pieces.
You know, man of few words, but certainly thrilled, and really warms my heart to see all this recognition.
Come and tell him, yeah. And we're all taking odds on his speech for the banquet, and the number one is thank you. Sit down.
For being a true example of what it is to be a Corvette enthusiast, and for all he has done to pass along that enthusiasm to so many. We proudly welcome Dr. Mike McCagh into the Corvette Hall of Fame.
Hello, folks.
Direct your attention to the screen.
Yeah, I just want to express my humble appreciation to both the National Corvette Museum, National Corvette Restorer Society, and my family. All 3 of those entities have allowed me to pursue my love of restoring old Corvettes. I was involved in the formation of the National Corvette Museum in the early 90s when I was president of NCRS. I think the museum has certainly come a long way from its modest beginnings. Of the 73 current Hall of Fame members in the National Corvette Museum, about 25% of them are notable NCRS members. And I think if it weren't for NCRS, I really doubt the National Corvette Museum would have been created. My family has allowed me to participate in many NCRS functions in the last 40 plus years. The chapter, regional, and national meets has allowed for the development of many lifelong Corvette friendships, and I thank them all. Lastly, and you all heard I was a man of limited words, I question my inclusion in a Hall of Fame that includes the likes of Zora and Dr. Dick Thompson, Rick Hendrick, and 70 other Corvette giants. Again, thank you all for the for including me in this astute gang of Corvette lovers. I'm out of here. It's Miller time.
Our next inductee is Wendell Strode. Direct your attention to the screens for Wendell's contribution to Corvette.
One of the most interesting things about Corvette history is the way that the right people with the right skills always seem to come along at the right time. Sometimes they were visionaries from General Motors, other times they were racers willing to risk it all. And there have always been the Corvette enthusiast to keep the crossed flags flying. In 1996, however, a struggling Corvette museum would need someone to save the day who wasn't a car person at all. It would need someone with the faith, confidence, and ability to turn things around. A banker named Wendell K. Strode. Wendell was the 12th of 13 children, all of them born at home. His father was a Baptist minister and a farmer, so Wendell learned early on about prayer and hard work.
Well, I grew up on a farm, and I'm one of 13 children, 9 boys, 4 girls, and the 9 boys were a big part of Daddy's farming operation. He would buy farms that needed attention, but had potential. And he could use those boys then and to help him clear woods or, plant crops, do whatever needed to be done. We knew what our duty was, and we knew come dark, we better have that done. We didn't know it was as tough, maybe looking back today, as it was then, because we just had a great time. Never could play sports in school because Daddy wanted us to come home and get right to work on the farm. We did work hard, we played hard, we learned the power of the team, how much we could accomplish working together.
He would also know heartache as he lost his mother when he was just 4 years old. His sister Helen, who was only 13 at the time, would step up to take on the responsibility of caring for her younger siblings.
But she always was an encourager. She always wanted us to get the education that she was not able to get, to go on to college, and just continuing to remind us to always put God first in our life, and that many good things would happen if we would certainly take that approach.
He would eventually go to WKU and then switch over to vocational school with an eye on being a sportscaster. That's where he would meet his future wife, Jan.
I had met this beautiful young lady when I had been attending a broadcasting school in Columbus, Ohio. It was almost instant love from my standpoint in that she was just beautiful. She had long legs, she had long blonde hair, and just really was something. And we dated a few times, very few times, before I was inducted into the Army, and corresponded quite a bit while I was in the Army, and while I was in Vietnam, and while I was in Seoul and in Korea, and we decided to get married. I might add that we agreed to get married after my time in Vietnam, and I wanted to be sure that I survived Vietnam and was able to come home.
Wendell would learn something about courage, camaraderie, and sacrifice from his Delta Company brothers as his platoon was ambushed. Several were wounded and some were killed. Wendell would get shot in the shoulder and take shrapnel from an exploding grenade.
I was fortunate to be sent to Japan. I was there almost 2.5 months for surgery and rehabilitation. So I come home in September of 1969, and we got married. And then in January of 1970, I was discharged from the Army and come back to Kentucky and started at Western Kentucky University.
Determined to make a life for himself, he returned to WKU and started his 23-year career with the bank. His welcoming smile, leadership skills, and ability to make those around him feel like they were family would take him to the top position. As president of the bank, he would first hear about a project to build a museum for Corvette in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
As I remember, it was in November of 1988 that an article was in the local newspaper that the NCRS was looking to build a national Corvette museum. And they hoped the Bowling Green community would be interested in it being located there. And when we as a chamber saw that article, we felt like it would be a tremendous economic development opportunity. We had the Corvette assembly plant here. We thought it would help stabilize the Corvette assembly plant staying here.
Several of us also bought into that idea, and as something that we certainly should pursue. We shouldn't let a prize like that go unsought. And of course, the people at the Chamber of Commerce, we brought them into it very quickly, and they were all in.
We had put together a task force on trying to recruit this museum. You know, at that time, Bowling Green was probably half the size that it is now. We knew we had to do something, you know, special to recruit this museum to the community we thought it should be in.
Although we recognized the fact that Bowling Green would probably be the smallest community that would be competing for, you know, a tourist attraction such as this, we wanted to give it a go. The museum belonged with the plant.
And Denny Griffin led the charge on that, and we got 30 acres donated. We got the state to agree to extend Corvette Drive and bring the utilities to the property. And we were all just kind of working together. And then in January of '89, a 5-person group, including Denny Griffin, representing the chamber, flew to Cypress Gardens, Florida, and made the presentation for the Corvette Museum to be in Bowling Green.
The NCRS was holding their winter regional meet in Florida at that time. While there, Wendell was able to observe something special about the Corvette and about Corvette people.
But I remember I was just overwhelmed with how this car could facilitate such a feeling of camaraderie and family. It reminded me so much of a family reunion.
A delegation from Bowling Green came down with the mayor, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Wendell Strode. They made a pitch to us about Bowling Green across the street from the plant. At the end of that meeting, the board of directors agreed to use Bowling Green as its future site for the National Corvette Museum.
NCRS's plans were then, after they decided where they were going, to announce the museum and then to do a national fundraising campaign. And they thought it would be very successful in generating monies, donations, and that was not as successful as they had hoped. And it was really starting to die on the vine, I guess we might say. And that's when the local community, and I was involved in that from a chamber's perspective, that's when the local community kind of stepped in and put together a financing package that involved 3 local banks. So with a $6 million bank loan and $4.3 million in bonds, then we had the financing package in place to build the museum. And then I think it was in 1992 that ground was broken. Zora was here, drove the bulldozer, and then Labor Day weekend 1994 was the grand opening.
On September 2nd, 1994, the National Corvette Museum had its grand opening. Thousands of Corvettes from all over the country converged on Bowling Green.
Kentucky State Police say the caravan from Nashville was strung out for 22 miles. The one from Louisville was even longer. Some were still coming in while the dedicating and speech making were going on, but the ribbon got cut eventually, and then the museum was open. We made it! They're looking for 500,000 visitors a year to see these rare and unusual Corvettes. Some look familiar, and others you'll never find anywhere else. But Corvette owners say they all.
The museum started off with a bang. It was a huge success. The grand opening was awesome. People came from all over, celebrated in a big way. But then things started to turn downward. The original attendance projections that were done before the museum was built were not realized. They were way off. So the revenue didn't come in like it was supposed to or like it was expected to.
Well, obviously with the financial situation as dire as it was at that point in time, the bank was concerned. So we knew pretty quickly that the museum was getting in a situation that it was not going to be able to sustain.
To think that a bunch of car guys could get together and get the wherewithal to build a building down there to honor a car is pretty remarkable. But to think that those same guys could run a museum or know how to run a museum is obviously, as it turned out, a stretch too far.
In 1996, the second year of operation, we were required to meet certain cash flow, loan covenant requirements, and the museum was not meeting those requirements. So the banks technically had the ability to foreclose on the loan. We were technically in default on those loan covenants. Of course, they didn't really want to do that, but we needed somebody to come in and turn this place around and get things back on the right footing again. Wendell, being an esteemed banker, well-known, respected, was asked to come and consider being the executive director of the museum. And he did. He brought his vast knowledge and experience and was able to make some major changes.
On December 20th, 1996, Wendell became the executive director of the National Corvette Museum.
He started out the first day giving the facility financial integrity. The banks became more confident. They were getting regular reports from the Corvette Museum, from Wendell, and they were getting positive reactions from the visiting Corvette enthusiasts. Within a year or so, the city and the county were paid back their financial contributions. It's been a struggle. I mean, it hasn't been as easy as it looks like from the outside looking in, because Wendell has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this facility.
Under Wendell's watch, the museum would nearly double in size and became the home away from home for Corvette enthusiasts. Events would be like family reunions, and membership would go from 1,600 to 36,000. It became the ultimate delivery destination for people picking up their new Corvettes, as well as a vital connection point for the Corvette team and their customers. With the addition of the NCM Motorsports Park, every aspect of the Corvette experience was embraced.
Wendell Strode, I mean, when you think about the National Corvette Museum, that's the person you think of. I mean, he's really been our leader, and he's brought this museum to be a standard of auto museums around the world. You know, it was started just there in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Now it's world famous. He made the museum feel like a family. He, you know, we do the Winter Circle dinner. He may enjoy those hugs a little too much, but when we go to the National Corvette Museum, we feel like we're having a big homecoming.
As the museum grew, it would face challenges, but through it all, his calming presence and the faith behind it would inspire his team to rise to the occasion.
February 12th, 2014 was a day I don't think anyone in the Corvette world will ever forget.
At the National Corvette Museum in Kentucky, 8 classic cars all swallowed up, and it was all caught on camera.
And I remember coming into work that day, and despite everything that happened and despite so many unknowns, you know, whether insurance was going to cover it, whether the building was even safe at that point, Wendell always had this calm demeanor about him, that he could handle any situation. And I think a lot of that has to do with his relationship with the Lord, and anyone that's been around him knows how spiritual Wendell is.
I mean, this could have happened right in the middle of the day when people were there. I mean, it's amazing.
I guess the one thing that we would say, we're thankful that the good Lord permitted it to happen at 5:44 in the morning.
Wendell Strode handled a disaster and made it into a positive, made it into a tourist attraction. We had that sinkhole incident, lost a lot of beautiful cars, got totaled. But the way he handled this, I mean, it brought the museum a lot of national attention. It was really clever that actually turned something tragic into something that really helped promote the museum and actually get more people interested in the National Corvette Museum.
Wendell at the museum really keeping the place alive and having it thrive. An incredible job. So Wendell should be extremely proud of what he's helped create, and a very deserving member of the Hall of Fame.
He was just the perfect guy at the moment, badly needed by the Corvette Museum, and he accomplished marvelous things for the Corvette Museum in his time as our leader. And he became a car guy through the people, because he first loved the people that drove up in their Corvettes, and then he came to love the Corvette.
Wendell always taught team members at the museum that we're not just in the car business, we're in the people business. And the reason people keep coming back to the museum is for those relationships, those friendships that they're building, whether it's at events or during museum deliveries, or getting to know one-on-one some of the staff or the insurance department, or driving a car on track. So one of the things that's been very important carrying beyond Wendell's time at the museum is remembering the people side of things.
He mentored us to be servant leaders to our members and our supporters and visitors, to care about each other, put God first, and to make sure that we make everyone feel like they're part of our family when they walk in.
Then I'd like for the Corvette community to remember me as someone who loved Corvette enthusiasts and made sure that this place that was their home, the National Corvette Museum, was a place they could come to, they could feel like they were coming home, and that they could be proud.
For his role in taking a struggling museum and growing it into the monument that it is to the past, present, and future of America's sports car, we proudly welcome Wendell Strode into the Corvette Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to present Mr. Ray Battaglini, who is going to come up and present the plaque to Wendell. And as Ray approaches, I will read this plaque. It says, Wendell Strode, for his outstanding accomplishments and significant contributions to the Corvette. Induction to the Corvette Hall of Fame, September 2nd, 2020, because of COVID, 2021.
Well, let me first congratulate our other inductees tonight. I've enjoyed learning more about them, and it's certainly an honor for me to join their company, and also the many, many others that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I appreciate greatly this honor, and it's very humbling to me. And when I was initially made aware of this, my first thought was to not accept it, if I could say it like that, because I just didn't feel like I was worthy. But my wife said to me that's not totally yours. It's also the people that you worked with and the many enthusiasts that you've got to know, and that made me realize that, yes, I should probably do this. And I'm very, very honored. As I think back to my life and my career, I think that maybe most everything that happened to me prior to December the 20th, 1996, that God was preparing me for the position at the National Corvette Museum. My upbringing on the farm, being one of 13 children, the influence of my dad as a dad and also as a Baptist minister, the influence of my sister, mother, Helen, and the community and people of Fountain Run, Kentucky, and my high school and the FFA, my time in the Army, my 25-year banking career, my involvement with the chamber, my involvement with my church, and my ongoing relationship with the Strode family, and particularly the Wendell and Jan Strode family. And a very few of my family is here tonight, and I'd like for them to stand. Please stand for you all to just recognize them for a minute. Haley and Caroline, why wasn't you all standing, honey? In my opinion, the bottom line for any organization is a byproduct of something. And our focus tried to be on that something. It was hiring the right people for the team. It was treating them fair, treating them right, as they are indeed the greatest asset of any organization. Helping them to understand that we're in the people business, providing them the proper resources to do their job, trying to create a great place to work and a good family environment, and developing a culture of service to others, including their fellow team members. We practiced the golden rule, and we tried to be fair in all the things that we did with regard to pricing our products and services. As my dad would say, no gouging. Starting out in December 1996, most of us had zero experience in managing an automotive museum. Most of the offices in the administrative area were empty because they were just not being used. But that group worked hard. We used common sense and common courtesy, and we developed a great leadership team and a great staff. And it was just wonderful for the things that they began to then accomplish and grow the museum. There is one team member that we want to especially acknowledge, and that's Christy Thomas. Christy worked side by side with me from day one. Actually, she was there a year and a half, 2 years and a half before I got there. Christy was our chief financial officer. She was our human resource officer. She's our operations officer. She's what I would call our chief listening officer. Most of us would go to her when we wanted to talk about things. She is a great counselor, and she became a great friend. She's with us tonight. You saw her in the video, but I'd like Christy to please stand so that we can thank you for your contributions. Christy, right over here. Almost equally as important then is our members. In January of 1997, we wrote a letter to the database that we had at that time that I think was about 14 or 15,000 names. Again, the membership base was 1,600. But one of the things that we said in the letter was, if it is to be, it is up to me. And we said the me is not me. The me is Corvette owners, Corvette enthusiasts. And we asked them to do one of two things or do both of two things. And one was to visit the museum. Come home. Come to your home. Bring that Corvette back to its birthplace, most of them's birthplace. The second thing that we asked them to do was become a member, and you saw on the highlight film where we grew the membership from 1,600 to 36,000. So they responded beautifully. National Corvette Restorer Society, National Council of Corvette Clubs, many individual Corvette clubs, started an ambassador program. All of those worked together to make the museum what it is and what it became. One of the highlights to me, and you see Calvin over here wearing his volunteer shirt, is most of our volunteers are also lifetime members. And the contributions that they have made has just been phenomenal, and we greatly, greatly appreciate that. Dave Hill and Corvette Engineering, they were on board almost day one. The C5 debuted on January the 5th or 6th, 1997, and I'd been there maybe 2 weeks, so that was a great plus. But Dave Hill did lots of things to help the museum in its early days. The Corvette assembly plant was already on board. Will Cooksey there, I'd gotten to know Will when he and Liz moved to Bowling Green, and Will had lots of ideas and thoughts of how we could improve the museum, grow the museum, enhance the Corvette experience, and so that was a great big plus for us as well. Then Corvette design come on, Corvette racing then with Doug Fehan. Doug regularly, when he talks, mentions the Corvette Museum and then the Motorsports Park as well. So all of those things contribute greatly to us being able to succeed from that standpoint. And it took probably a little bit longer than any other area of Chevrolet and Corvette, but Corvette marketing come on board. Many don't realize that when I first went to the museum, that the relationship with the museum moved from marketing to finance. They were very concerned with the impact that the Corvette Museum maybe would have on the Chevrolet and the Corvette brand. And we were able to do and rebuild those bridges with regard to having that relationship that was so important. But we kind of say all that to say that it's really the people that makes all the difference in the world. I can honestly say to you tonight that I never once thought that the museum would not succeed. As a banker, I knew the bank did not want to foreclose on that place, and I felt like I knew that GM did not want it to go under, but did not want to do a lot there. But the main thing that I knew, and was reflected in the video, was my experience in Cypress Gardens, Florida, where I got that feeling of camaraderie. And if we could just create a place where Corvette people could feel like that was their home, that the Corvette Museum was going to succeed. You know, success looks easy to the people that weren't around when it was being earned. But a lot of people worked really, really hard to reach that success. And at the end, you realize how important your decisions were at the beginning. There's a verse in the Bible where the Apostle Paul says, "We have derived great joy and comfort from your love, and our heart has been refreshed through you. So your love has provided us great joy, has provided us great comfort, and our heart has been refreshed. Our staff's heart was refreshed. We were energized and re-energized because of you all. So thank you all so very, very much. We love you. God bless you.
At this time, we'd like to ask Doug Fehan and Tom Peters to join Wendell up here on the stage for a picture. If y'all give us just a minute.
Tom.
Oh, okay, okay. How you doing, buddy? We'll get them and then we'll get the three of you.
You got it.
Ladies and gentlemen, our inductees in the Corvette Museum Hall of Fame. We want to invite you to visit the Sky Dome at the National Corvette Museum tomorrow and spend some time with the Hall of Fame exhibit that will be highlighting tonight's four inductees. Before we go, I think it's important that we recognize the National Corvette Museum staff who has worked so diligently to keep our museum moving forward and to help put on this tonight. So if you're staff members of the museum, please stand. And you can thank Bob for the videos and Bryce and his staff for the evening. Remember the commemorative glass that's in front of you. Please take that with you. And one more time, I would like for you to please stand and join us as we honor one more time our 2021 Corvette Hall of Fame inductees, Doug Fehan, Henry Haga, Mike McCagh, and Wendell Strode. Please join me today. This concludes our evening program. Thank you for being here. Have a safe journey home. Enjoy the museum tomorrow. And may God bless you. God bless America and the museum. Thank you.
Selling ice cream.